The wormhole was collapsing. Humans used it as a slingshot. Alarms howled down the bridge of the UES Meridian as Captain Zara Blackwood gazed at the tactical display, her knuckles white on the command console. The enormous wormhole that had linked the Kepler system with Earth for 30 years was writhing like a dying star, its edges churning with spasmodic violence that hurt her teeth just to gaze at it. "Captain, the Zephyrian fleet is retiring," said Lieutenant Commander Marcus Chen at the navigation station, his voice taut with incredulity. "All 73 vessels are coming to minimum safe distance." Zara's jaw clenched. The Zephyrians had been humanity's allies for 15 years. Ever since first contact had gone surprisingly well despite the cultural barriers. But when the wormhole started destabilizing 6 hours ago, revealing that its collapse would trap both species in this remote system forever, old tensions had resurfaced with terrifying speed. The Zephyrians wanted to preserve their advanced fleet. Humanity wanted to get home, and there was only enough stable transit time left for one species to make it through. "And what about the Corvani?" Zara asked, even though she already knew. The response would be worse. Still holding aggressive formation at the wormhole's periphery, came the reply from Chief Tactical Officer Rebecca Santos, her fingers dancing across her console. 49 heavy cruisers, all weapons hot. There. Not even pretending this is anything but a blockade now. The Corvani had never tolerated humans. From the day humanity had blundered through the wormhole 15 years previously. Parched refugees running from a dying Earth, the reptilian race had looked upon them as trespassers. Now, with the wormhole perishing and mere hours of peace ahead of them, they saw their opportunity to address what they referred to as the human problem. Once and for all, Zara turned to her chief science officer, a brilliant woman named Dr. Elena Vasquez, whose wild hair and coffee-stained lab coat concealed one of the sharpest minds in known space. "Elena, give me options. Please tell me you found something in all that data." Dr. Vasquez lifted her eyes from her station, dark eyes alive with manic intensity that said she had been driven on caffeine and raw intellectual ferment for the last 18 hours. "As a matter of fact, Captain, I believe I have. But you're going to think I've gone mad. Try me. It isn't randomly shutting down. It's going through a typical decay cycle, and said cycle generates what I can only describe as a slingshot form of movement. As the warping of space condenses, it's causing massive gravity waves which would otherwise presumably fling whatever is within them at massive rates." Lieutenant Commander Chen swiveled around in his chair. "Theoretically, Elena, we're discussing our lives here." "I know that," said Dr. Vasquez irritably, and then relaxed. "Listen, Marcus, I've rerun the numbers 17 times. The numbers add up. If we time it perfectly, we can employ the collapse of this wormhole as a way of launching our vessels at speeds which would make our existing engines children's toys." Captain Blackwood's heart raced. "Launch them where? Just exactly. Where we please. The gravity slingshot maneuver would give us enough velocity to traverse the far side of the system in minutes as opposed to days. We would be able to punch through the Corvani blockade before they even had a chance to understand what was happening." The bridge went quiet, except for the constant hum of life support and an occasional cum system crackle as other human ships reported in with progressively despairing status reports. Zara was aware of the crushing burden of 12,000 human lives bearing down on her shoulders. The fleet of evac vessels held all survivors remaining from Earth's colonies. What was left of a species that had even lost its homeworld to planetary ecology collapse? "What's the survival rate?" she asked quietly. Dr. Vasquez's excitement was damped. "Unknown. The gravitational stresses would be tremendous. Our vessels weren't built to handle this level of acceleration. Best scenario, we suffer perhaps 10% of the fleet from structural failure. Worst case, Worst case, we all die anyway, summed up Commander Santos darkly. At least this way, we'd die fighting. Zara shut her eyes and concentrated. Outside, on the main view screen, she could see the wormhole. Its previously perfect circular opening twisted and distorted like a face wailing in torment. Every few seconds, enormous power discharges would leap across its face, and every one of them carried them a bit closer to the point of no return. The COM panel rang, and Admiral Harrison Foster's face appeared on the view screen. His rugged face was drawn, aged well past his 60 years by the unachievable choices of the last few hours. Give me a status report, Zara. Corvani has sent another ultimatum. We've got 47 minutes before they begin shooting at any human. Ship heading toward the wormhole. Admiral Dr. Vasquez has a proposal. It's insane, but it might be our only chance. She quickly outlined Elena's proposal, watching as the Admiral's expression went from skeptical to calculating to what seemed desperate hope. The other fleet commanders will never agree, he said finally. Captain Morrison has actually threatened surrender as an alternative to risking his transport ships. Captain Park wants to negotiate with the Zephyrians ourselves and gain asylum. What do you think, sir? Admiral Foster sat in complete silence for an extremely long period of time, staring off-screen at something Zara could not see. Then he stared back at her, his eyes with the type of resolve she had learned about in history books about Earth's greatest strategists. Heirs, I think we didn't survive losing our homeworld just to panhandle for leftovers in another man's system. Put the proposal. On all vessels, those wanting to risk it can volunteer. Those afraid can stay on a powder keg and roll the dice. The next 30 minutes passed in a blur of preparation and desperate calculation. Dr. Vasquez worked with the fleet's other science officers to refine their approach vectors, while engineering teams across the fleet pushed their engines past safety limits to build up the momentum they'd need to survive the slingshot maneuver. To Zara's astonishment, almost 80% of the fleet had volunteered for what had come to be dubbed by the crew as the Hail Mary run. Even Captain Morrison, following a heated argument with his passengers, concluded a similar decision regarding the civilian transports. They would die attempting freedom rather than live as captives within the Kepler system. All vessels report. Ready, sir, stated Lieutenant Sarah Kim at COM. We have 43 vessels ready for slingshot insertion, of which 7 are heavy cruisers, 18 frigates, and 18 commercial transports. Zara nodded, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. Dr. Vasquez, final systems check. Gravitational wave amplitude is increasing as predicted. The wormhole's collapse is accelerating, but we still have our window. If we're going to do this, it has to be in the next 8 minutes. Captain, broke in Commander Santos. The Corvani are reacting to our maneuver. They're shifting positions to interdict any approach toward the wormhole. On the TAC display, Zara saw the Corvani formation changing, their huge vessels interposing a lethal barrier between their own fleet and their one hope of getting back home. Corvani ships were bigger and better armed even than anything humans had ever constructed, fruits of a culture which had been subjugating star systems when man was still learning about fire. They won't let us get close enough even to try a slingshot, said Marcus with a harsh glint. Then we make them, said Zara, her voice with a steel edge she never expected. All ships, this is Captain Blackwood. We're going to make a modified approach. Our heavy cruisers and frigates will take on the Corvani blockade straight on, attracting their fire and breaking their formation. Our civilian transports will then slip through this gap to the wormhole first. Captain, protested Dr. Vasquez. The schedule will have to be exact for all ships. We put the transports through first on a slingshot maneuver. They will have no escorts on the far side. Better some of us make it home than none of us, Zara replied. Besides, those transports are carrying our children. Everything else is secondary. The fleet commenced its approach, human vessels coming in a formation as disciplined as would have pleased their forebears. The heavy cruisers took point, their weapon systems at high power and their shields at maximum for what was coming. Behind them, of a smaller and swifter design, came the frigates, poised to make an opening if any sign of Corvani softness appeared. And buffered at the heart of the formation came the transports. Their non-military passengers concentrated on emergency shelters as skeleton crews, made ready for the greatest navigational challenge of human history. First Corvani ordnance illuminated. Space like a killing aurora, titanic energy beams capable of vaporizing a human ship within seconds. One of humankind's newest heavy cruiser vessels, the UES Defiant, was hit directly on its port shields and stumbled back out of formation. Atmosphere, venting from a series of hull breaches. Return fire, Zara commanded, and the human fleet unleashed everything they had. Their weapons were smaller than the Corvani guns, but human engineers had learned to be creative with limited resources. Plasma torpedoes streaked through space. Alongside kinetic railgun rounds and experimental ATS-energy weapons that pushed the boundaries of known physics. This combat was chaos unadulterated. Ships twisted through three-dimensional space, jinking to avoid enemy shots while at the same time positioning themselves to fire their own shots. The UES Meridian shuddered as a near miss overstrained her shields, and Zara could taste blood. On having bitten her tongue, its transport group is coming into slingshot position, said Lieutenant Kim amidst the sounds of combat. Dr. Vasquez, they require the insert vector now. It's transmitting coordinates, stated Alina, her hands flying across her console as she corrected on a real-time basis to account for the changing gravitational field. Transport group, you've got a 40-second window opening at 3 minutes and 16 seconds. You miss this window. Your next opportunity won't come along for another 6 hours, which would come long after that. The wormhole would have finished collapsing by then, and the Corvani would have had ample opportunity to blast every human ship within the system. Captain Walsh of Transport, U.S. New Haven, called over the comm, her tone resolute even as fear must have been eating at her gut. Agreed, Dr. Vasquez. Transports all confirm timing. We will achieve window. But even as she was speaking, tragedy hit. The UES Courage, one of the heavy cruisers on escort duty with the transports, received a devastating hit which blew apart its reactor containment. The blast was visible on all of this battlefield. A tiny sun which temporarily overpowered the erratic wormhole itself. The sinking of the Courage created a void within human formation which was quickly taken advantage of by the Corvani. There was a formation of 3 enemy cruisers which went through the line, sitting between the transports and their rescue. We won't quite make it, was the word of Marcus's older brother, Captain David Chen, of the Transport U.S. Sanctuary. The Corvani have severed our approach vector. More time is needed. Time they didn't have. Zara had a perfect view of the situation tactically, and it was a snapshot of disaster looming. The transports would not be able to combat their way past the Corvani blockade, and each passing second edged them closer toward missing their slingshot window altogether. It was then that Lieutenant Commander Marcus Chen took an action which would go down in human history as long as the species lasted. Captain, requesting permission to take the Meridian on a direct assault run, he said quietly. Marcus, what do you mean? Those 3 Corvani cruisers interposed between the transports. We can attack them from astern at maximum acceleration and perhaps disperse their formation long enough for the transports to pass through. Zara's heart stopped. That's a suicidal run. The Meridian is not a heavy cruiser. We can't afford armor, let alone firepower, to engage 3 hostile capital ships. We can't afford to win, sir. We can just stall for time. The bridge was quiet, except for sounds of combat swirling about them. Zara glanced around at her crew. These men and women who had become family during their years of exile within the Kepler system. Alina Vasquez was still furiously working at her science station, tweaking millimeter adjustments within their slingshot calculations. Rebecca Santos had put all power on weapons and shields, readying them for whatever directive came next. Sarah Kim was conferencing with the other vessels, her youthful face ashen but resolute. They were all volunteers. Every single person on this ship had chosen to be here, had chosen to risk everything for the chance to get their people home. "Do it," said Zara. The UES Meridian broke formation and charged toward the Corvani blockade at a speed that caused the ship's hull to groan in protest. Behind them, the rest of human cruisers and frigates redoubled their assault, attempting to distract Corvani's attention from the Meridian's suicidal charge. 30 seconds to transport window, said Dr. Vasquez, her voice tense with concentration. The 3 Corvani cruisers had seen the Meridian coming and had trained their guns on the incoming threat. But they had had their attention focused on blocking the transports, and this sudden strike from an unfamiliar direction caught them off guard. All fire, all weapons. Zara shouted, and the Meridian fired everything at its disposal. Plasma torpedoes and railgun rounds battered the closest Corvani ship, grinding down its shields and blasting holes through its armored plating. The alien ship's retaliatory fire was disastrous, yet the Meridian's suicidal charge had done what it was designed to do. The gap in the Corvani formation was open. "Transport group, go now," Lieutenant Kim shouted into her com. 18 civilian vessels plunged toward the disintegrating wormhole, their hulls shimmering with fierce gravitational radiation as they hurtled toward the point of slingshot. The first transport, the UES New Horizon, went into the churning pile of warped spacetime at precisely the moment outlined in calculations by Dr. Vasquez. "Slingshot successful," Alina reported, watching her instruments track the transports. "Impossible acceleration. New Horizon is achieving 0.75 light speed. They'll reach the far side of the system in 4 minutes." Ship by ship, the others came along, each vessel navigating the razor's edge between gravitational annihilation and their sole hope of salvation. The collapse of the wormhole was speeding up now, its lips starting to roll inward as the exotic mater, which had held it stable for 30 years, at last relinquished its futile struggle against physics laws. But the UES Meridian was in trouble. The Corvani return fire had crippled her engines and breached her hull in a dozen places. Atmosphere was venting into space, and the ship's artificial gravity was fluctuating wildly. "Captain, we have to abandon ship," said Commander Santos, whose tactical station lit up as a result of an overloaded power coupler. "Negative," said Zara resolutely. "We still have 17 transports we must get through. We maintain position as long as possible." The next minutes felt like hours. Meridian continued to sponge Corvani firepower, her crew performing miracles on maintaining systems online as the ship steadily came apart around them. The last transport, Marcus's brother in command of the UES Sanctuary, entered the slingshot. As Meridian life support finally failed. "All transports through," Lieutenant Kim stated, her voice coming through the emergency oxygen mask. All of them now wore on the bridge. "They're all going past sensor range." Zara felt a moment of pure relief, followed immediately by the realization that their own situation was hopeless. The wormhole was too unstable now for any more ships to attempt the slingshot, and the Meridian was too damaged to retreat to a safe distance. Captain Dr. Vasquez said quietly, "I'm reading massive gravitational fluctuations from the wormhole. It's going to collapse completely in the next 30 seconds. Can we achieve minimum safe distance?" Alina shook her head. "Not with our engines offline. The gravitational implosion will destroy anything within 10,000 kilometers." Zara looked around at her men once more. These men had obeyed without question, had trusted her judgment even when it had placed them into a desperate situation. They had a right to live, at least on an operational ship, back toward a star they could call home. All other human vessels. "This is Captain Blackwood," she stated into the com. "The transports have come through. The mission is successful. It was an honor to serve with all of you." But then there was Marcus Chen's voice on the interior, come from the nav station, distant but determined. "Captain, I'm still picking up 17 other human ships on sensors. They're not retreating back to a safe distance." Zara's eyes widened as she realized what the other ships were planning. "They're going for the slingshot too. Ma'am, with this wormhole, this shaky, the grav stresses will be triple what the transports went through. Most of these vessels will not survive it. But some may," said Rebecca Santos softly. "And if they do, uneven attempt it, they'll surely perish when the wormhole collapses." On the main view screen, Zara could see the remaining human fleet positioning itself for their own desperate attack on the dying wormhole. The heavy cruisers Resolution and Defiant led off, battered hulls a testament to battle yet engines still running. Behind them came the frigates and a few remaining support vessels, each of them carrying hundreds of human lives. Admiral Losty's voice on the comm was calm and steady against their environment of chaos. "All ships, this is Admiral Foster. We're going home with our people, one way or another. It has truly been my privilege to have served with all of you. Execute slingshot approach in 10 seconds." The human fleet dove toward the collapsing wormhole as one, their ships disappearing into the maelstrom of distorted space-time. Just as the exotic matter containment field finally failed, the wormhole imploded with a violence that lit up the entire Kepler system, its death throes visible from planets dozens of light-years away, when at last the gravitational waves died down and the sensors cleared. All there was remaining was empty space where a wormhole had existed for 3 decades. The Corvani fleet was alone within their system, lords of a prize no longer worth claiming, but 67 light-years away. In what was once human homeland within the Sol system, the autonomous deep space observation centers began registering titanic gravitic distortions incoming from the direction of the Kepler wormhole. The earliest ships which emerged from hyperspace were traveling at velocities which would have been impossible. Their hulls a blinding white with heat of interstellar medium friction. The UES New Horizon, badly damaged but intact, was the first to transmit identification codes. Behind her came 17 more civilian transports, their passengers alive and screaming with joy as they saw the familiar blue-white glow of Earth's sun on their sensors. Over the next 6 hours, 11 others emerged from hyperspace, many of them disintegrating but still functional. The heavy cruiser Defiant emerged with a large part of her port side missing, held together by emergency force screens and willpower on the part of her crew members. 3 frigates emerged with all systems dark, their crews under emergency hibernation. After their life support had gone dark during acceleration on the slingshot maneuver, a total of 41 of the original 67 human vessels had managed to survive the impossible voyage back home. 26 vessels and 8,000 lives had perished along with the UES Meridian and all hands. But the civilian transports had come through unscathed. With the children and families whose human future they represented, the word of the fleet's return spread through the Sol system within hours. Earth, still healing from the planetary disasters, which had sent humanity into the stars initially, issued a system-wide holiday. Mars and Europa colonies fired celebration fireworks visible from orbit. Even the tough-as-nails miners within the asteroid belt took a day off work just to have a drink or two in a toast to the Kepler system's heroes. But it was transport. U.S. Sanctuary Captain David Chen, who perhaps summed it up best in his initial communication with Earth. His voice was gruff from hours of emergency operations. and he had to stop a few times to regain his composure as he reminisced about his younger brother Marcus and the crew of Meridian whose efforts had been responsible for his own survival. This is Captain Chen of the UES Sanctuary, herein reporting successful return of our ship to Sol System after 15 years on exile. We're heading home due to the bravest human beings I've had the privilege of knowing, as they looked at a dying wormhole and opted to use it as a slingshot rather than turn tail and flee. The human spirit is alive. Earth, we just had forgotten how to struggle for it. The children aboard the transport ships would grow up to become engineers and pilots themselves, inspired by the stories of the great slingshot maneuver that had brought them home. They would design new ships capable of surviving even greater accelerations, and develop technologies that would make interstellar travel routine rather than desperate. But they would also retain a memory of a lesson learned by their parent generation. Within the Kepler system, confronting insurmountable odds and certain demise, humans never surrender. They think of something else. They take a risk a sane species would never even entertain. And occasionally, just occasionally, they manage to transform catastrophe into victory. Years afterward, when human beings had scattered to tens of star systems and the Kepler event had entered mythopoeic status, physicists would pore over the gravity data from the wormhole disruption and declare that the slingshot maneuver would have been impossible. The stresses engaged would have rent asunder any material known, and the degree of precision involved would have been humanly impossible. Dr. Alina Vasquez, who had died aboard the Meridian calculating approach vectors until the very end, became the subject of academic papers and theoretical studies. Her equations were carved into the memorial wall at the rebuilt Kepler Memorial Station, a monument to the crews who had sacrificed everything to bring their people home. But perhaps the most fitting tribute came from an unexpected source. 5 years after the return, a Zephyrian diplomatic mission arrived in the Sol System carrying a message from their High Council. The aliens had witnessed the final battle in the Kepler system, had seen the desperate human charge toward the collapsing wormhole, and had been profoundly moved by what they called humanity's magnificent insanity. The Zephyrian envoy, communicating through translating software still grappling with human notions of honor and sacrifice, conveyed a message that would endure generations. Your species does not think as we think. When we saw this wormhole collapse, we calculated odds of surviving and withdrew to safe distance. This was logical. This was rational. This was what any intelligent species would do. But you looked at this same folding wormhole and calculated how you could turn its death into a weapon against distance itself. This was not logical. This was not rational. This was not what any intelligent species would do. This was human. And perhaps it is why, of all species we've come into contact with during our long history, only humans have ever impressed us enough to search them out as friends and not subjects. This human-Zephyrian alliance would last centuries, based on respect for each other's idiosyncratic solutions of insoluble problems. Zephyrians possessed advanced technology and communal knowledge. Humans possessed a sense of imagination, willpower, and a form of glorious madness able to turn a cosmic disaster into a way back home. But on silent evenings, when old comrades came together to reminisce about lost friends, they would mention Captain Zara Blackwood and the men of the UES Meridian. They would discuss Dr. Alina Vasquez, whose mathematics had brought about the unthinkable. They would recall Lieutenant Commander Marcus Chen, whose spirit had driven him into a suicidal mission, so others could live, and they would tell their children and grandchildren about the day humanity faced extinction in a distant star system, looked at a collapsing wormhole that was meant to be their doom, decided to ride it home instead. The lesson of the Kepler slingshot wasn't just about physics or navigation or military tactics. It was about the fundamental nature of the human spirit, the refusal to accept defeat even when defeat seemed inevitable. Other species might have superior technology or greater wisdom, but humans had something else entirely. They had the ability to see opportunity in disaster, to find hope in despair, and to turn the very forces trying to destroy them into the tools of their salvation. As services of remembrance occurred, and as the champions were honored, as children came of age, and as the colonies matured, this story of a Kepler slingshot came to signify something more than a history. It came to signify a promise, however dark it appeared. However improbable the odds, humanity would rise above. Because that's what human beings do. When the universe attempts to knock them down, they don't merely survive. They overcome. They rise. They excel. And occasionally, when they're truly fortunate and truly desperate and truly courageous, they transform their worst tragedy into their greatest victory. The wormhole had collapsed, as physics had insisted. But human spirit had taken advantage of that collapse as a stepping stone back toward home, with itself carrying the seeds of a centuries-long, galaxy-spanning future. And perhaps that was the most human of all of it.